Welcome to African Folktales by Mozzie. Before we dive into today's legendary chronicle, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where you are watching from in the comments section below. We love seeing how far our stories travel across the globe in the land of our ancestors. It is said that the greatest storms do not always begin with a thunderclap. Sometimes they begin with the silent crawl of a spider or the missing feather of a bird. They say that a person who brings home ant-infested faggots should not complain when lizards visit their hearth. But today, my people, I do not bring you a story of tortoises or clever hares. I bring you a story of the concrete forest, a place where the lions wear wrappers and the hyenas wear suits. This is the Chronicle of Yard 42, a kingdom built of zinc and soot, where a tiny piece of silver paper caused a war that shook the foundations of the earth. Gather round the digital fire, for this is the legend of war in Yard 42, the case of the missing Maggi. The first thing you will notice when you walk past the rusty iron gate of Yard 42 is not the smell of the nearby gutter or the sight of the leaning walls, but the sound of absolute war. Yard 42 is a legendary face-me-I-face-you compound, where privacy is a myth and secrets are public property. There are 20 rooms in this long, narrow building, and each room holds a story of struggle, laughter, and heavy grumbling. The building itself is painted a color that was once bright green, but now looks like a sick lime. The roof is made of zinc sheets that cry loudly whenever it rains, and the corridor is always filled with charcoal stoves, plastic buckets, and the lingering scent of fried onions. At the center of this kingdom is the kitchen general, a woman named Mama Tochi. She is the unofficial ruler of the shared kitchen, a dark, smoky room at the back where all the women gather to cook. Mama Tochi has a nose that can smell a secret from 3 streets away, and a voice that sounds like a cracked bell. But the person everyone truly fears is the landlady, Madame Gold. Madame Gold is a woman who believes that everything in Yard 42 belongs to her, including the thoughts in the tenants' heads. She walks with a heavy limp that she uses to gain sympathy when she wants to collect rent, but she can run like a sprinter if she hears the sound of a forbidden electric cooker. In Yard 42, peace is just a short break between 2 different fights. Every tenant knows that a quiet morning is just a warning that a loud afternoon is coming. People live here because they have to, but they stay because the drama is better than any television show they could ever afford. The rules in Yard 42 are simple, but impossible to follow. Rule number 1, do not touch another person's charcoal. Rule number 2, do not eavesdrop on a conversation unless you are prepared to join the fight. Rule number 3, never, ever touch another person's food supplies. In a place where everyone is struggling, a single cup of rice is worth its weight in gold. The tenants are a colorful mix of characters. There is Baba Segan, a retired school teacher who wears his glasses on the tip of his nose and quotes the Bible to justify why he hasn't paid his electricity bill. There is Jennifer, a young lady who works at a hair salon and spends all her money on wigs that look like colorful clouds. Then there is Brother Chidi, a man who claims to be a businessman, but is mostly seen sleeping in the corridor with a toothpick in his mouth. But the heart of the compound is the shared kitchen. It is a place of gossip and heat. The walls are black with soot, and the floor is always slippery with spilled oil. Every tenant has a small wooden box where they keep their salt, oil, and seasoning cubes. These boxes are kept under lock and key. But in Yard 42, a lock is just a suggestion. The tension had been building for weeks as small things started to disappear. A pinch of salt here, a spoonful of oil there. But the real war began on a Tuesday morning when the most sacred item went missing. A single cube of Maggi seasoning had vanished from Mama Tochi's box, and the compound was about to explode. Mama Tochi stood in the middle of the kitchen, her hands on her hips and her eyes flashing like lightning. She had opened her wooden box to find that her last cube of Maggi was gone. To anyone else, it was just a small piece of seasoning, but to Mama Tochi, it was a declaration of war. She didn't scream immediately. Instead, she let out a long, low whistle that made the chickens in the yard stop pecking the ground. "Who took it?" she asked, her voice vibrating through the soot-covered walls. "Who among you has the liver to steal from the lioness?" The other women in the kitchen, including Jennifer and a new tenant named Mrs. Aid, went silent. They knew that when Mama Tochi spoke in that low tone, danger was near. "Mama Tochi, maybe you used it and forgot," Jennifer suggested, trying to keep her voice steady while she stirred her pot of watery beans. Mama Tochi turned her head slowly, looking at Jennifer as if she were a fly. "I am many things, Jennifer, but I am not a forgetful woman. I counted my cubes last night. I had 3. This morning, I have 2. 1 is missing. And whoever took it will not like the taste of the soup I am about to cook for them." She marched out of the kitchen and into the center of the yard, her wrapper tied firmly around her waist. She took a deep breath and let out a scream that woke up Baba Segan, who was napping under the mango tree. "Thief, there is a Maggi thief in yard 42. Come out and confess before the gods of the kitchen strike you down." Madame Gold, the landlady, emerged from her room, rubbing her eyes and looking annoyed. She hated being woken up from her morning nap, especially by a fight that didn't involve rent money. "What is this noise about a seasoning cube?" she barked, leaning on her walking stick. "Mama Tochi, are you losing your mind? It is just Maggi. I will give you one from my room so we can have some peace." But Mama Tochi shook her head violently. "It is not about the cube, Madame Gold. It is about the principle. Today, it is Maggi, tomorrow it will be my pot of soup, and next week, it will be my wrapper. We have a thief in this yard, and I will not rest until the person is exposed." The compound was now fully awake. Tenants stood by their doors, watching the drama. Brother Chidi leaned against a pillar, picking his teeth. "Maybe it was a rat," he said with a lazy grin. Mama Tochi glared at him. "A rat that knows how to open a wooden box and pick only the seasoning? That must be a very educated rat, Chidi. A rat that perhaps has a room in this compound." The accusation hung in the air like heavy smoke. Everyone looked at each other with suspicion. In yard 42, everyone was a suspect. The case of the missing Maggi had officially begun, and it was quickly turning into a battle for respect. Madame Gold realized that if she didn't settle this, her compound would turn into a battlefield. She cleared her throat and made a grand announcement. "Everyone, gather in the center of the yard. We are going to hold a tribunal. Nobody leaves for work or market until the truth is found." The tenants of yard 42 gathered under the mango tree, sitting on plastic stools and upturned buckets. Madame Gold sat in the middle on a high-backed wooden chair, looking like a village judge. Mama Tochi stood to her right, acting as the prosecutor. The atmosphere was thick with heat and anger. "We will start with you, Jennifer," Madame Gold said, pointing her stick at the young lady with the bright pink wig. "You were in the kitchen first this morning. Did you see anything?" Jennifer shook her head so hard her wig shifted to the side. "I was only there to boil water for my bath, Ma. I didn't even open my own box, let alone Mama Tochi's. I am a child of God." Mama Tochi snorted. "A child of God with pink hair. We will see." Next was Brother Chidi. He yawned and stretched his arms. "I don't even cook, Ma. I buy my food from the junction. Why would I steal Maggi? To suck it like candy." A few people laughed, but Mama Tochi silenced them with a look. Then it was Mrs. Aid's turn. She was the newest tenant, a quiet woman who kept to herself. She looked terrified, her hands trembling as she held her wrapper. "I was just making pap for my baby," she whispered. "I didn't see any Maggi." The investigation went on for an hour, but everyone denied the crime. It was a classic whodunit, but with higher stakes. Without the cube, Mama Tochi's reputation as the kitchen general was at risk. If she couldn't protect her own seasoning, she couldn't protect her authority in the shared kitchen. The war was just beginning, and the lines were being drawn in the sand of yard 42. As the sun climbed higher, the heat began to make everyone irritable. Madame Gold was getting hungry, and Mama Tochi was getting more aggressive. "If nobody wants to talk, then we will use the traditional method," Mama Tochi announced. The tenants gasped. The traditional method in yard 42 involved everyone putting their hands into a bowl of water while Baba Segan recited a prayer. They believed that the person who stole the item would have their hands turn a strange color. It was mostly a psychological trick, but in a superstitious place like yard 42, it usually worked. Baba Segan stood up, adjusted his glasses, and brought out a rusted metal basin filled with soapy water. "This is a serious matter," he said, his voice deep and solemn. "A thief in the house is like a snake in the bed. Let us pray." While he prayed, the tenants looked at each other. Some were sweating. Others were looking at the ground. Mrs. Aid looked like she was about to faint. Brother Chidi was still picking his teeth, but his eyes were darting back and forth, just as the first person was about to dip their hand into the water. A loud clatter came from the kitchen area. Everyone froze. It sounded like a pot falling. Mama Tochi rushed to the back, followed by the entire crowd. They burst into the smoky kitchen to find a small, scruffy dog standing on the table. In its mouth was a small, crumpled piece of silver paper. It was the Maggi wrapper. The dog belonged to a neighbor from the next compound, a stray that often snuck into yard 42 to look for scraps. A wave of relief and then a wave of confusion washed over the crowd. The thief was a dog. Jennifer started laughing, her pink wig bouncing. "You say told you, it wasn't a human. All this drama for a dog." Even Brother Chidi chuckled. "Mama Tochi, you owe that dog an apology for calling it an educated rat." But Mama Tochi didn't laugh. She walked over to the dog and grabbed the wrapper from its mouth. She looked at it closely and then looked back at the crowd. Her face was even more serious than before. "Wait," she said, her voice dropping to that dangerous low tone again. "This wrapper is empty." The dog didn't steal the cube. It only found the wrapper on the floor. She pointed to the ground near Mrs. Aid's cooking spot. There, hidden behind a stack of firewood, was a small, half-used cube of Maggi. It wasn't Mama Tochi's, it was a different brand. But next to it was a small piece of Mama Tochi's unique limited edition seasoning paper. The tension returned instantly. The dog had only uncovered the evidence. The real thief had used the Maggi and thrown the wrapper where the dog could find it. The war wasn't over. It had just taken a sharper turn. Mama Tochi turned to Mrs. Aid, who had turned a pale shade of gray. "Mrs. Aid, why is the wrapper of my Maggi sitting behind your firewood? And why did you say you didn't see anything?" The quiet woman started to cry, her shoulders shaking. "I didn't mean to," Mrs. Aid wailed, falling to her knees. "My baby was crying, and I had no money for soup. I just wanted to make the pap taste a little better, so he would stop crying from hunger. I was going to replace it tomorrow when my husband sent money." The compound went silent again, but this time it wasn't the silence of anger. It was the silence of shared pain. Everyone in yard 42 knew what it was like to be hungry. They knew the desperation of a mother who couldn't feed her child. Jennifer stopped laughing. Baba Segan looked at his feet. Even Madame Gold softened her gaze. Mama Tochi stood there, holding the empty wrapper, looking at the crying woman on the floor. The kitchen general was known for her toughness, but she was also a mother who had raised 5 children in this same yard. She looked at the half-used cube behind the firewood and then at the baby sleeping in a small basket by the door. The case of the missing Maggi was no longer a criminal trial. It was a mirror reflecting the poverty of everyone in the yard. Mama Tochi sighed, a sound that seemed to release all the tension in the room. She walked over to Mrs. Aid and helped her up. "Why didn't you just ask me?" she asked softly. "In this yard, we are poor, but we are not heartless. If you had asked for a piece of Maggi, I would have given you to." Mrs. Aid continued to sob, burying her face in her wrapper. "I was ashamed, Ma. I am new here, and I didn't want everyone to think I am a beggar." Madame Gold stepped forward, using her stick to balance herself. "Shame is a luxury we cannot afford in yard 42, my daughter. We are all swimming in the same soup here." She turned to the rest of the tenants. "The tribunal is over. There is no thief here, only a mother in need. Mama Tochi, what do you want to do?" Mama Tochi looked around at her neighbors. She saw the dusty corridor, the leaking roof, and the tired faces of people who worked from dawn to dusk for very little. She realized that her war had been foolish. She walked back to her wooden box, unlocked it, and took out the remaining 2 cubes of Maggi. She handed them to Mrs. Aid. "Take these. And tonight, we are all eating from my pot. I am making a large stew, and everyone must bring their plates." The compound erupted in a different kind of noise, not the noise of war, but the noise of celebration. Brother Chidi offered to go and buy some extra meat with the little money he had. Jennifer promised to bring some rice. Baba Segan said he would provide the spiritual grace for the meal. The war in yard 42 had ended not with a victory, but with a feast. Fate had spoken through a stray dog and a missing seasoning cube, reminding them that they were stronger together than they were apart. The communal dinner that night was the most peaceful event yard 42 had seen in years. They cleared the center of the yard and set up a long table made of planks and crates. Mama Tochi cooked a massive pot of stew that smelled so good it brought neighbors from the other compounds to their gates just to sniff the air. Mrs. Aid sat next to Mama Tochi, her baby now awake and smiling. Madame Gold sat at the head of the table, looking like a queen. As they ate, They talked about their lives, their dreams, and their struggles. They shared stories of how they ended up in Yard 42 and where they hoped to go one day. Brother Chidi admitted he wasn't really a businessman but was looking for a job as a driver. Jennifer shared that she wanted to open her own hair salon. Baba Segan told stories of his days as a teacher in the village. The missing Maggi had become a joke, a symbol of how easily they could turn on each other and how quickly they could reconcile. Mama Tochi raised her glass of water. "To Yard 42, she said, where Maggi is gold, but neighbors are diamonds. They all raise their glasses and plates, their voices rising in a beautiful, messy harmony. The war was over, and a new era of community had begun." But as the night ended and the tenants returned to their rooms, Madame Gold looked at the empty Maggi box in the kitchen. She smiled to herself. She knew that in a place like Yard 42, peace never lasted forever, but for tonight, it was enough. The peace in Yard 42 lasted for exactly 3 days. On the 4th day, a new problem arrived at the gate, and it was much bigger than a seasoning cube. A group of men in orange vests arrived with ladders and heavy tool belts. They were from the electricity company. "We are here to disconnect the power for the entire street," the leader said, looking at a clipboard. Yard 42 is 6 months behind on payments. The tenants rushed out, their faces filled with panic. Without electricity, the compound would be plunged into total darkness at night. The fans wouldn't work in the stifling heat, and those who sold cold water and drinks would lose their business. Madame Gold limped to the gate, her face red with anger. "We have been paying. Every month, I collect the money from the tenants." The tenants looked at each other. They had indeed been giving their light money to Madame Gold every month. Baba Segan pushed through the crowd. "Ma, if we have been paying, why is the company saying we are in debt?" Madame Gold looked confused, then her eyes widened as she looked at her own room. She realized that the manager she had hired to take the money to the office, a cousin of hers who had recently disappeared, had likely stolen all the funds. The warden had been tricked by her own blood. The tenants' fear quickly turned into suspicion. "Did you spend our money, Ma?" Jennifer asked, her voice high and sharp. The war was back, but this time, the enemy was the landlady herself. The electricity men didn't care about the drama. They climbed their ladders, snipped the wires, and left Yard 42 in a state of shock. The fans stopped spinning, and the compound went silent. Madame Gold sat on her stool, her head in her hands. "I didn't know," she whispered. "My cousin. He told me he was paying the bills. I gave him every kobo." The tenants were not in a forgiving mood. 6 months of our hard-earned money is gone. Brother Chidi shouted. "And now we are in the dark." Mama Tochi stepped forward, but this time she wasn't attacking a neighbor. She was looking at the bigger picture. "Shouting will not bring back the light, and it will not bring back the money," she said, her voice commanding respect. "We need a plan. Madame Gold, you are the owner of this house. What are you going to do to fix this?" Madame Gold looked up, her eyes filled with tears. She was a tough woman, but she was also old and now felt very foolish. "I don't have that kind of money, Mama Tochi. I used all my savings to repair the roof last year." The compound felt like it was shrinking. The darkness was coming, and with it, the heat and the mosquitoes. Baba Segan adjusted his glasses and looked at the group. "We need to hold another tribunal, but not to find a thief. We need to find a solution." They gathered once again under the mango tree, but the mood was heavy and desperate. The darkness of the first night without electricity was suffocating. People sat outside their rooms, fanning themselves with pieces of cardboard. The children were crying, and the adults were grumbling. Without the fans, the rooms felt like ovens. Brother Chidi brought out a small kerosene lamp, its flickering light casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. "This is how our ancestors lived," he joked, but nobody laughed. Mama Tochi was busy organizing a light contribution. She suggested that everyone pay a small extra amount for the next few months to clear the debt, while Madame Gold would forego her profit from the rent to cover the rest. It was a fair plan, but many tenants didn't have a single extra naira to give. Mrs. Aide sat in the dark, her baby sleeping fitfully. Jennifer was worried about her wigs. The heat was making them smell like burnt plastic. As they sat there, a car pulled up in front of the gate. A man in an expensive suit stepped out. The word demolition hit Yard 42 harder than any electricity blackout or stolen Maggi. The tenants stood frozen, their mouths open in shock. Demolition, Madame Gold gasped, her stick slipping from her hand. On what grounds? I have the papers for this land. Man in the suit didn't look impressed. The papers are old, madam. This area has been rezoned for a luxury shopping mall. Your building is structurally unsound and a blight on the neighborhood. Here is the official notice. He handed her a bright red paper and turned to leave. 30 days. If you are still here, the bulldozers will come anyway. The car sped away, leaving the tenants in a cloud of dust and despair. The war for Maggi seemed like a playground game now. They were facing total homelessness. Jennifer started to cry, her pink wig falling off her head. Mrs. Aid held her baby tighter. Baba Segan sat on the ground, his Bible closed. 30 days, he whispered. Where will we go? Madame Gold looked at the red paper in her hand. It felt like a death warrant. For the first time, the warden looked completely broken. She looked at her tenants, people she had bullied, scolded, and loved in her own twisted way. She realized that Yard 42 wasn't just a building. It was a community, and she was about to lose it all. The next morning, the usual morning inspection didn't happen. Madame Gold didn't come out to check for leaves or water drops. She stayed in her room, the door locked. The tenants gathered in the corridor, but they weren't whispering about gossip. They were talking about survival. We can't just leave, Brother Chidi said, his voice unusually serious. I have no savings, and my family is in the village. Where would I go? Jennifer nodded, wiping her eyes. Every house in this city is too expensive. They want 2 years' rent in advance. Who has that kind of money? Mama Tochi stood in the middle of the group, her face set in a grim expression. We need to fight. This house might be old, and it might be green, but it is our house. We can't let them tear it down just for a shopping mall. She marched to Madame Gold's door and knocked loudly. Madame Gold, come out. This is not the time to hide. Your tenants are waiting for a leader. After a few minutes, the door slowly opened. Madame Gold looked like she had aged 10 years in a single night. Her hair was messy, and her eyes were red. What can I do, Mama Tochi? I am just an old woman with a limp. The government has spoken. Mama Tochi grabbed her hand. The government has spoken, but the people haven't. We need to go to the agency and show them that this building is not a blight. We will clean it, we will paint it, and we will show them that human beings live here. The plan was desperate, but it was all they had. For the next week, Yard 42 transformed. The war in Yard 42 became a work in Yard 42. Every tenant, from the oldest to the youngest, joined in. Brother Chidi found some leftover white paint from a construction site. Jennifer used her hair salon skills to organize the cleaning crew. Even Baba Segan climbed a ladder to fix the leaking zinc sheets, his Bible tucked into his belt. They scrubbed the soot from the kitchen walls, cleared the gutters, and planted small flowers in plastic containers along the corridor. Mama Tochi cooked for everyone, using her famous stew to keep their spirits high. Mrs. Aid helped by looking after all the children so the parents could work. They worked in the dark at night, using kerosene lamps and flashlights. The compound started to look different. The faded lime green was replaced by a bright, clean white. The leaning walls were reinforced with sturdy planks. Yard 42 was no longer a blight. It was a testament to what a community could do when faced with a common enemy. But as the 30-day deadline approached, the fear remained. Would a coat of paint and some flowers be enough to stop a bulldozer? They had spent all their remaining money on supplies, betting everything on this one chance. On the 29th day, the man in the suit returned. He was surprised to see the gate painted black and the walls glowing white. He walked through the corridor, looking at the clean floors and the flowers. The tenants stood by their doors, silent and watchful. Madame Gold met him in the center of the yard, her back straight and her stick held like a scepter. Welcome back, she said, her voice steady. As you can see, Yard 42 is not a blight. It is a home. We have fixed the structure, we have cleared the gutters, and we have a community that cares for this place. The man in the suit looked around, his expression unreadable. He touched the fresh paint on a pillar. It looks better, I admit, but the rezoning is still in place. A mall brings more money to the city than a 20-room apartment. Baba Segan stepped forward. A mall brings money, but a home brings peace. If you tear this down, you are throwing 20 families into the street. Is that the kind of development the city wants? The man looked at the retired teacher, then at the young mother with her baby, then at the tailor and the driver. He sighed and looked at his clipboard. I will be honest with you. My boss is a businessman. He doesn't care about flowers. He cares about the bottom line. The man in the suit told them that the only way to save the building was to prove that the land papers were still valid and to pay a renegotiation fee to the city council. The fee was massive, 500,000 naira. It was an impossible amount for the tenants of Yard 42. We don't have that much, Madame Gold whispered. The man shrugged. Then the bulldozers will be here at dawn tomorrow. I'm sorry, he left, and the silence that followed was heavier than the one after the Maggi went missing. They had worked so hard, and it still wasn't enough. Jennifer started to pack her wigs into a cardboard box. Brother Chidi sat on the steps, staring at the ground. But Mama Tochi wasn't ready to give up. Wait, she shouted. Everyone, bring out whatever you have. Every kobo, every hidden savings. We have 12 hours. They began a desperate collection. Baba Segan brought out a small tin hidden under his bed. It contained his funeral savings. Jennifer brought out her wig money. Mama Tochi emptied her wooden box. Even Mrs. Aide brought out a small gold earring, her only inheritance. They piled the money on the table in the yard. They counted it 3 times. It was only 100,000 naira. They were still 400,000 short. The sun began to set, and the hope in Yard 42 flickered like a dying lamp. Just as the moon rose, a car pulled up at the gate. It wasn't the man in the suit. It was a woman in a simple dress, looking tired but determined. She was the manager of the electricity company. I heard about what's happening here, she said, looking at the white walls. And I heard about your cousin, Madame Gold. He was caught trying to scam another building across town. We recovered some of the money he stole from your tenants. She handed Madame Gold a thick envelope. It's 400,000 naira. It's not everything he took, but it's what we found, the tenants gasped. It was exactly the amount they needed. Fate hadn't just spoken. It had shouted. Mama Tochi grabbed the envelope and hugged the woman. You have saved our lives. God will bless you. They didn't waste a second. Mr. Okafor, a tenant who worked as a messenger, took the money and the petition to the city council's emergency night office. The rest of the tenants stayed awake, sitting in the yard, holding their breath. Every time they heard a heavy vehicle on the main road, they jumped, thinking it was the bulldozer. It was the longest night in the history of Yard 42. They prayed, they sang, and they held each other. At 6 a.m., a loud rumbling sound approached Ogba Street. The ground shook as a massive yellow bulldozer turned the corner, its engine roaring like a beast. The tenants rushed to the gate and formed a human wall. Mama Tochi was at the front, her arms crossed. The bulldozer stopped just inches from the gate. The driver looked confused. I have orders to demolish this blight, he shouted over the engine. Just then, a motorcycle sped up, and Mr. Okafor jumped off, waving a green paper. Stop, the order has been rescinded. The fee has been paid, and the papers are verified. The driver took the paper, read it, and shook his head. Fine by me. I hate tearing down houses that actually look good anyway. He put the bulldozer in reverse and drove away. Yard 42 erupted in a scream of joy that was heard 3 streets away. They had won. The blight was now a landmark. Madame Gold fell to her knees, weeping with relief. Mama Tochi hugged Jennifer, pink wig and all. They had saved their home, and they had done it together. The case of the missing Maggi had started a war that ended up saving the entire compound. The aftermath of the victory brought a new sense of pride to Yard 42. They were no longer just a group of people living in the same building. They were a family. Madame Gold officially appointed Mama Tochi and Baba Segan as the compound council to handle the bills and the maintenance. No more cousins would be allowed to manage the money. The electricity was reconnected, and the first time the fans started spinning again, the tenants cheered as if it were a national holiday. Life returned to a new kind of normal. They kept the white walls clean and the flowers watered. Mrs. Aide's husband finally sent money, and she was able to buy a whole carton of Maggi, which she shared with everyone in the kitchen. But the lessons of the war remained. They learned that a community is only as strong as its weakest member. They started a compound fund where everyone contributed a small amount each week to help anyone who fell on hard times. Yard 42 became the most desirable place to live on Ogba Street. People no longer looked at it with disgust. They looked at it with envy. A month later, Jennifer finally saved enough to open her small hair salon at the front of the building. Madame Gold gave her a discount on the space, saying it was interest on the wig money Jennifer had contributed to save the house. On the opening day, the whole yard gathered for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Mama Tochi made her famous stew, and Baba Segan gave a speech about the glory of hard work and pink hair. As Jennifer cut the ribbon, she cried with joy. "I thought I would be homeless, but now I am a business owner." Brother Chidi also found a job as a driver for a local school, and he was often seen washing his yellow bus in the yard. Singing loudly, the warden, Madame Gold, became much softer. She still complained about the noise, but she did it with a smile. She realized that her tenants weren't just a source of rent. They were the reason she wasn't lonely in her old age. She often sat under the mango tree with Baba Segan, talking about the good old days and the great Maggi War. As the flamboyant tree in the corner began to bloom with bright red flowers, a new tenant arrived at the gate. He was a young student, looking nervous and carrying two heavy bags. He looked at the bright white building and the happy people in the yard and felt like he had found a sanctuary. Mama Tochi met him at the gate. "Welcome to Yard 42, she said, taking one of his bags. "We have a few rules here. Rule number 1, don't touch another person's charcoal. Rule number 2, if you're hungry, just ask." The student smiled, feeling the warmth of the place. He was assigned a room next to Mrs. Aid. That evening, as he was settling in, he realized he had forgotten to buy seasoning for his noodles. He walked to the shared kitchen, his heart beating fast. He saw Mama Tochi stirring a pot. "Excuse me, Ma, do you have a spare Maggi cube?" Mama Tochi paused, a big smile spreading across her face. She reached into her wooden box and handed him 2 cubes. "Take these, my son. And remember this day. A single cube can start a war, but it can also build a home." The legend of Yard 40 to spread far and wide. It became a story that parents told their children about the power of unity. The case of the missing Maggi was turned into a small play performed by the children of the neighborhood during the annual street festival. Every time the dog appeared on stage with the silver wrapper, the crowd roared with laughter. Yard 42 stood tall, a white beacon in a neighborhood of faded colors. They proved that poverty doesn't have to mean misery, and that even in a face-me-I-face-you compound, you can find a kingdom of peace. The red flamboyant tree grew taller, its branches reaching over the wall, offering shade to the people passing by. Inside the compound, the sound of the cracked bell voice of Mama Tochi was still heard, but now it was usually calling people to come and eat. The warden had retired her iron fist and replaced it with a heart of gold. Fate had spoken, and it had said that love is the best seasoning for any life. Today, if you visit Ogba Street, you might miss the shopping mall and the fancy cars. But you won't miss Yard 42. You will see the white walls, the black gate, and the flowers in the corridor. You might see an old woman sitting under a mango tree, laughing with a retired teacher. You will hear the sound of children playing and the smell of Mama Tochi's stew drifting through the air. You will realize that this is not just a building. It is a miracle. A miracle that started with a missing seasoning cube and ended with a community that refused to be broken. The war was over, and the peace was permanent. Yard 42 remains a place where everyone is a neighbor and nobody is a stranger. And if you ever find yourself in the shared kitchen, remember to look at the soot-covered walls. They are not just black with smoke. They are black with the history of a people who fought for their home and won. As the sun sets over Ogba Street, the lights of Yard 42 flicker on, shining brightly for all to see. Fate has spoken, and its voice is the sound of laughter in the yard. And so, the story ends, but remember, never let a missing cube of Maggi blind you to the value of the hands that cook beside you. I am Mozzie, and this has been an African folktale. Until we meet again under the mango tree, stay wise.